Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name's Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It's 11 o'clock, Friday, Stephen Friday, Central Texas time, June 7th. And this is episode 56 of Right Side Up in honor of my buddy Steve Staggs and your buddy, too. I'm fired up today. Oh, for so many reasons. Let me read you this one. You're going to love this. What a day this is going to be. It already is. This is the day the Lord has made. 1 Corinthians 13:12. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. There is hope and promise in the future, folks. Each day, the grace of God continues to renew itself, right? Mercies renew each morning. So thank you for being here. We got an amazing Right Side Up. We're gonna go into. This is episode 17. I've labeled this one "You Rule." You rule. And what does that mean? Well, Steve's going to tell us about that. I'm so thankful for you. I'm really, really fired up. There's so many amazing things that have been happening. And the number one thing is I've been practicing what I preach, which is Jesus is alive and he speaks. And I'm going to tell you the ways in which he's been speaking to me are just fascinating. Not as prophetic things for someone else, but direction, holding each thought captive and seeing, all right, you're guiding my steps. Well, this is what the Bible says. This is what Jesus says. And you're like, well, I have to actually consider him to be alive and speaking, right? Like, we don't worship a dead Jesus, right? He's alive. The whole resurrection thing's probably pretty important, don't you think? But I'm glad you're here. Mike Costell's number one. He needs a straight IV drip of straight Jesus. Well, let's do our best. John May, I really need to hear the good news of Jesus Christ, our King and Savior. And you know what? What is the good news if it is not good news for you, my friend? Right? If you think about this, is that we go and really what are we doing? I'm just here to encourage you. Every time I interviewed Steve and we talked about things, he's like, guys, you got to go ask him yourself. That's all I'm telling you to do. Go ask him yourself. Do not believe me. Do not trust me. And that's all he ever said to me. And what's so refreshing about that is everyone else is trying to tell you, I've got the corner on what God says. No, he's just, this is really what we should be doing for folks is, hey, go ask him yourself. The truth is probable. Go ask him. Are you interested in knowing? We know that it's dim. That we will see it fully. But here's the cool thing. If you're lost and aimless and challenged and depressed and have anxiety and unknown, what did Steve do? What did he teach me to do? All right, let's stop for a second here. Let's back up. Let's go, hey, Jesus, how do you see this? Just like Jesus himself did when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Oh, man, he had a request, right? He conferred with the Father. He said, remove this cup from me, yet not my will be done, but your will be done. You think about that prayer and engaging. Well, what is prayer but talking, conferring? And he's changed. Hey, help me understand how you see this. I'm like bleeding, sweating blood, going to this cross. Hey, remember what we planned from the beginning? Folks, iron sharpens iron. That's all we're doing is a reminder, not to follow a man like Steve or follow me. No, it's to encourage one another to say, hey, don't lose sight of what's true. Because here's the crazy thing that happened this week that I just want to share and blow your mind. You know, Jack, the guy that used to own Twitter, remember the founder of Twitter? Jack was at a conference and he basically said, you don't realize what's happening, but the algorithms in the black box, regardless of whether they're open source or not, are essentially giving you the next thing. So think about you're scrolling on your phone, right? And I see my kids do this a lot, and I'll do it on occasion. So I'm going to put my phone up here. I literally am watching something. The algorithm knows everything that I've looked at, and I go to the next thing. And what is the next thing? Ooh, that's really interesting, right? Have you ever had that situation? You're watching some video, and I love watching things about knife making or any artwork or anything that anyone crafts with their hands. And I'm watching this and I go to the next one. I'm like, "Oh, did I choose that content? No, there was an algorithm that chose it for me." What Jack basically said is we're essentially programmatically removing choice from you. And what happens when I give you the next thing that is ideal for you keeps you from making choices yourself. And so we are essentially giving over our authority to this thing that is what? Keeping us distracted and inside of this thing, right? Rather than seeking the one who created it all to tie us into things where we actually are creating, where they're consuming and being distracted. And literally, it's enslavement by an algorithm. And to hear Jack say this, the creator of Twitter, to hear him say this, I'm like, oh my goodness, wow, that is so true and so interesting. And so we think about what is the goal of the crafty one who is the king of the air in Satan himself. What is he doing? Well, he's very crafty. I want to keep you off center. I want to distract you, and I want you to give your authority over. Basically, I want to eliminate you from making choices because choices are the seeds of reality's harvest. Ooh, is that what it is? I think I may have just said that wrong. Here's the banner. I got the banner here. I literally there it is. There it is. Decisions are the seeds of reality's harvest. That is exactly what he said. Think about that. So if I can keep you from making decisions, right? And I can control your decisions by you essentially saying, "Hey, what's next?" You don't realize it, but someone else is choosing for you. What is the whole purpose? Why did God create? Ooh. He designed this so that we would rule and reign with him in the fullness of his nature and character. Well, what is ruling, knowing good and evil? It's making choices. And how do we make choices? Well, man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. So you need to be able to hear. Faith comes through hearing, by the way, and hearing, wow, through the spoken word of God. Hello. What's up, my friend? Ego Foundation in the house. Blessings all from Taryn. It is good to see Hexclan is back. Carter Hill, we can begin. And Sam Kemp, late arrival. You're not late. That's just the intro. Let's get into the content. Thank you so much for joining today. It is great to see my friends here. I hope this is a tremendous blessing to you. We'll be back after this segment and we'll be talking about it. I'm going to be taking a bunch of notes like I always do and get ready for your mind to be blown. Thank you, Lord, for Steve Staggs. And thank you, Carter Hill, for bringing Steve to that Texan meetup. I really, really appreciate that so much. You have no idea. Here we go.
There's a reason they say there are no atheists in the foxhole.
Right.
You know, there's all kinds of variations of that concept. No atheists in a plane crash.
Yeah.
Thing, and I've actually been on airplanes that where people thought they were going to die. I mean, the turbulence was so severe that people were literally screaming out and praying and stuff like that. And I didn't hear a single person say, "What are you praying for? There ain't no God out there." No, they were doing the same thing.
Yep.
And the point of that is that there is something inherent in us that knows that we're involved in a game that's bigger than we are. The choice in that is, are we going to try to play that game by ourselves? Or are we going to try to learn how that game needs to be played? So and everybody gets a chance to be confronted with that choice. We talk about it with our kids, right? Things like, hey, the world doesn't revolve around you. Hey, well, why do we say that to our kids? Because our kids think that, well, first of all, their consciousness is only about themselves. So all they see is through their own perspective. And so for them, the entirety of creation is all about them. Well, as that continues, as you get older in life, they start tagging a name on it called a narcissist and all these. And what do? You're trying to pull people out from this very narrow self-focus on things to the point where you're actually taking a step back and saying, okay, what is actually going on here? The reason why the powers of darkness pick at us is because they know that in major crisis we bind together.
Wow, that's big.
So they pick at us because it's just an irritation to us that enlivens our emotions in the wrong kind of way that then can be used to inflame the environment. And it's incredibly effective. So eventually you learn, for anyone who's out, eventually you learn um, how to step out of that and say, okay, either I got to figure this out all by myself, or I've got to seek professional help, or gee whiz, maybe it might just be worthwhile asking the guy who actually built it and see what he has to say about it.
Hmm.
Hey, what's going on there? Well, man, listen, let me tell you what, son, you wanted to be in the game, you're in the game. So you think you're just going to go about this stuff and you're going to do all these things. You're going to unlock global generosity. You're going to do all of these great things for all of these people that are going to help everybody. You're going to upset the system. You're going to talk about new economic order. And you think that's going to be a cake and you're just a walk in the park?
Yeah.
Well, man, you better be concerned if it becomes a walk in the park.
Right.
Because then you're not a threat. That's that one is laying hold of to aggressively seize the kingdom. The one who is in control of the kingdom at the time is doing exactly the opposite, only he's trying to retain control. And that's the world that we enter into if you're going to live in this right side up world according to how Jesus built it. And so, whatever it is that comes against you, then instead of assigning meaning to it, my suggestion is to step back out of it and say, Jesus, how do you see this thing? Is this something I need to be concerned about? Is this something I need to pay attention to? Nah, just picking, keep going.
That we got to pause there and put a highlight on that right there. As a very, very practical thing, I recognize this in you, Steve. I was sitting at a table with you when you got the phone call that your father had passed.
Yeah.
And I saw that happen real time. I've seen you in situations where people are losing their ever loving minds, and the pause, right? My father-in-law said to me when I got married, he goes, "Hey, just one piece of advice: major on the majors and minor on the minors."
Yeah.
And you think about that as a simple kind of dadism, and you go, you know what? Hold on a second. If I really take stock of all of the things that have escalated out of control and have caused some of the most damage in my life, it's been through picking things that have ignited and escalated into something that were not of their origin. It was really truly to create an inferno. It's almost as if the adversary has an accelerant.
Yeah.
And you give
and
it
that accelerant is us. We're the accelerant.
Yeah. And it gives you that spark happens, and it's like we react, and that is the reaction. In the reaction is the accelerant to this stuff. And we go, hold on a second. How many times have we, apologized and went, you know what? That was a straight up misunderstanding. It was not the intent. And we just let this thing get out of control, and everything piled onto it. And I just really, that idea of pausing, I was thinking about, Ray and I talked about this for years. What kind of men do we want to be?
Yeah.
What kind of men do we want to be? And I remember, think about the old guy, right? It's like a grandfather guy who's got soft hands because he hasn't worked in years. And I had these men in my life, that I run into occasionally where you're a kid, you might be 10, 11, 12 years old, and things are happening around the party. And we had a grandfather in my wife's family who was like 95, and he was one of these guys. And he would just sit there on his chair, and all the kids are running around, and there are, it was like 12 great grandkids for him. And he's the kind of guy that would, if you're a 10-year-old kid, he'd go, "Hey, come here, kid." Right. And he'd pull you out of this mess. Right. And he'd have these soft hands, and he'd pull you in and grab you and get real close to you and go, "How you doing?" And, you don't realize what that means to someone who's young. Like, I really care about you.
Yeah.
How are you doing? And I see you, and I recognize you, and you have value to me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, well, what kind of person is that? Well, that's somebody who is not reactive. That's not someone who is a bull. That's not someone who is dominant. That's not someone who bullies people. That's not someone who speaks first. It's someone who listens. It's someone who is calm and at peace. And I think about this currency of God is like, what is the practical outcome of this whole journey? Well, more peace, more rest, more patience, more kindness, more love, more long suffering. And you think about that. We talked about fruit of the spirit or fruit of a tree that it produces. Is I don't think in our culture we consider that to have value.
Yeah.
But when you think of the kingdom of heaven, you're like, well, why is it that when you love your enemy, that you become sons of God?
Yeah.
Because it is counterintuitive to the way in which the system is upside down. It wants you to freak out. It wants you to inflame and accelerate and burn the whole place down.
Yeah.
And I see that in relationships, especially in marriages, with people who are that hold contempt, that go very quickly to criticizing people's character, right? That don't have the discipline to understand. Hold on, I'm looking at someone that God created.
Yeah.
I'm going to reduce you to something that is I'm going to criticize your very nature and character, which is biting and very, very damaging. And it's interesting because that theme of letting go and actually pausing and going, hey, Jesus, what do you think about this? In its very nature is value, because you're saying, I'm no longer, am I going to react to this? And I experienced that this morning. Something happened in the family and my wife was really upset. And I said, partly because I didn't have the ability to get worked up about it. And I had to say very specifically, I hear you. And I know that this is very important to you. I'm going to help you with this problem, but I'm not going to share in the emotion of it. Not because I don't love you or don't care about it, because I know that the best thing I can do is to serve you by helping you solve this problem rather than commune with you in the emotional heat of it. And so what did that do? It de-escalated the situation and it provided, well, you said to bless and protect. Well, okay.
Yeah.
And you think about that, it's almost like we are bombs that have this fuse and we go, I'm going to light this fuse, and we light this fuse and it's burning. And you're just asking people to snip it, just cut it.
Yeah.
And it burns closer and closer. And you're just like, please snip this. I don't want to explode. And there are people who just let it explode over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is the very essence of ruling, by the way. We've talked about, again, the Elohim. I don't know any other word to put there.
Yeah.
It's the word that was originally there for those who are interested in knowing where that word came from. And it's part of the very practical expression of ruling, that when the thing is getting ready to blow up, you don't blow up with it.
Right.
You actually rule it. No, that isn't where we're going to go. That's destructive, and we're not going to participate in that.
So I just have to say this. Rule in his nature and character.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've said it so many times, and I just want to emphasize this. I think of ruling, Steve, sometimes as if domination,
Yep.
right? Control, hard, like hammer. I'm a hammer.
Yep.
And what you've said to me, which is the nuance of this, is no. What does it mean to rule in his nature and character, not in my nature and character
Yep.
or my desires?
Yes.
What does it look like to do it in his? Can you talk about that nuance of why that is so important? Because that's, to me, the essence of it all.
Well, it is, which I'm really thrilled to hear, that kind of land and in a way that we can talk about it in this group, is the entirety of the creation, by its very definition, is a form of a device one way or another. The solar system is a device. The earth is a device. Gravity is a device. These physical bodies that we operate on in this earthly dimension is a device. And every single device is neutral. It has no capacity to do anything unless and until it is animated by something that has life. Okay? So the nature and character of the life will actually determine how the device is used. So if we are, so the nature and character is the inner essence and nature of the one possessing life. And it comes out through what we speak. And then what we speak, we then act on through what we do. Okay, so now think about when Jesus said about the Father, your word is truth. God is love. His word is truth. So what is that saying to us? That in truth, in the kingdom, is a character quality.
Yeah.
It's not an assembling of factual statements. It is a character quality. It is the quality that does not possess any perverse element in it. It is absolute truth. So When you rule in his nature and character, you're ruling in that nature and character that possesses no perverse element in it. It is the pure expression of love. It has no intention to do harm, but it does allow absolute liberty to choose. So when you are ruling in our nature and character, that has not yet come into the nature and character of God, not yet been developed in that way. That's the likeness element, um, in the creative story. We are taking on the nature and character of the seed of the serpent. And that nature and character is destructive. It is, it considers itself superior. It wants to subordinate in a way to enslave. It wants to dominate. It is vengeful. It is angry. It is all of those things that are destructive in their nature. In the nature and character of God, there is no destructive element. There is no intention to destroy. There is an intention to purge out what is destructive. Okay? And so learning to rule in the nature and character of Christ and the nature and character of God is that you are dealing with those elements that are contrary to the intention and purpose of God in order to render them inoperable, to purge them out, to disarm them so they no longer have effect to disrupt the nature and character of God and what he is doing. And by the way, you do that when you say, in the instance of your wife, when she's in a really, difficult emotional time, honey, I'm going to do everything I can to bless and protect you. And the way that I can do it right now is to not participate with you in that thing that is destructive to you. So if you're okay, I'm going to step outside of that and we're going to deal with this so we can restore peace to you and to our home. You good with that, honey? So see, it's not there's no vengeance in it.
Right.
The entire concept, vengeance is mine, says the Lord, that verse. Well, we hear that as him being pissed off.
Yeah.
No, my vengeance is completely different than yours. So let's deal with mine, not yours.
Right. What's amazing is, I think about what's attractive to my wife, right? From a character perspective. I don't have a six pack, so let's focus on character versus physical attributes here. But what is acceptable? And I think, so many times the testing of things is like, what are you going to do under these circumstances? Yeah. And what can I expect from you? Right. And I think so many times, even if it's not intentional, and I think this men and women thing happens a lot. And I think because there's so many men in crypto, this is probably a helpful bit of information, is that, we're not, not just called to be stoic, but in this nature of blessing and protecting and this, ordering ourselves with listening to the living Jesus, right? This idea, all right, well, how do you see this? And I've even noticed in our conversations that I can tell you're like asking him right in the moment. You're like, hey, what do you think about this? And it's like, you're looking for that idea to say, Jesus, tell me how do I respond to this?
Yeah.
And I think about that as a discipline, right? This idea that, hold on, well, this is kind of like holding every thought captive. Like I'm going to say, all right, I'm consulting with you. I've got you in my ear and I'm consulting with you at every moment. And I think about that as it relates to my wife is you go, well, what does she want? What makes me attractive to her? Well, I think I think of a very traditional part of men is that a woman would want to, in some cases, see you not bend and break. And I don't mean artificially, putting up stiffness. What I'm talking about is this idea of how do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with these difficult things? How do we determine if they are major things? And you've said this many times. You know what? There are some times when we consult with Jesus and say, hey, Mike, you need to go in and get this heart looked at. But then there are other times you say, hey, okay, how do you see this? And that idea of saying, all right, okay, I see that this is emotionally charged. And then there are times when I've been emotionally charged, like I've got diabetes and my blood sugar gets out of whack and I get weird.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, okay, hold on. How should I see this in all of these circumstances and situations? And how do we serve each other? Because if you recognize that we all have this common, adversary, and we find ourselves kind of swimming in these bullets. That's how I feel like. I feel like these bullets are just constantly being shot around. Is that how do we bless and protect each other? And it's not just a man-woman thing, but it's this thing of what is community about? What does this look like? And how do we, because there's so much value, I feel like, in expressing these things. Because even in the point of, I'm dealing with something really difficult, If I can just say it, it seems to lose power over me. If I can at least articulate it and get it almost out like I'm vomiting out, some poison.
Yeah.
There's something about that that I think is so tremendous that we serve one another by almost allowing space for a little bit of crazy at times, not reacting to that. We almost, sometimes you have to cry. Yeah, I don't know if you've been in the situation, but it's like almost like I have no option, but crying is pretty much the only option I've got. And it's like, hold on a second. Sometimes that actually feels good to do. I think about in mourning and in all of these things. So I think that it's a very, very practical thing. And it's also, I keep coming back to this. If no temptation has seized you except what is common to man, these are common to man things that in the structure of things, these things are the things that you will face over and over
Yep.
and over.
Yep.
Are you going to be stuck in the cycle of overreacting and inflaming these things, or are you going to stop? Because Jesus is actually probably the greatest temperer of things. Because it's
Oh
almost
man.
like he's like, I literally had him say to me, I could have been really mad. I was very, very justified in being very, very
Yep.
angry. And it was a surprise to my family that I wasn't.
Hmm.
And I said to him, I'm like, Jesus just told me to stop.
Yeah.
Just stop. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna just shut up and I'm gonna stop. And you know what? And I was thinking about that. Well, that's kind of like loving your enemies. Well, anyone else would have just gone scorched earth on this deal. Well, no, I'm not reacting that way. I'm not gonna be drawn off sides because I recognize that he's a shepherd out front and I recognize his name and what he is doing in this world and his purposes are greater than any of these small picking things that I might be experiencing at this moment. And
Well, that's
it's testing, which is weird. Weird.
well. It is the very nature of, and I've said it before, but it is the very nature of ruling. See, if we get sucked into reacting, then we are being ruled.
Yeah.
There's just no way of getting around it.
Are we
You
giving
know.
authority to it feels like I'm giving up the authority because I'm basically subjecting myself underneath this control.
Well, yes. I mean, if you really want the mechanics of how it works, because we kind of like these,
Yeah.
there is a structure, an order, a design. It, the creation functions.
Yeah.
I mean, there are just no two ways of getting around it. It functions, and it functions. We could use term well-oiled machine. Like a precisely tuned clock. I mean, this thing functions in ways that are, they're just mind-blowing. I mean, planet Earth fits all the definition of a spacecraft, and this thing is whatever. I mean, whatever it's doing without crashing.
Yeah.
How is that happening? Well, there is a structure, there is a design, there's engineering, there's all kinds of things around it that enable it to function. And authority is one of those elements that has a means by which it functions. Okay, so you're in this situation, an irritation shows up, something wants to blow the thing sky high. Well, if it had the authority to blow it sky high, what would it do?
Blow it out of the sky high?
There you go. Now, because it's not blowing it out of sky high, blowing it sky high, what's it trying to do?
Get my permission to do it.
That's right. It's trying to seize control over someone or something that it does not possess control over. So what it does is from this conflict adversary perspective that we were talking about before, earlier on, is it does not possess standing. It has no authority to effect. It has no, and because it has no authority to effect, it has no power to do what it wants to do. So where must it go to get both the authority and the power to accomplish what it wants to accomplish? It has to get it from the ones that possess authority and power. Enter us. So if it wanted to blow the thing up, it would just blow it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it doesn't. So what it does is it picks, it irritates, it aggravates, it does all these kind of things to get us emotionally charged so that our emotions begin to take over and they begin to rule. Emotions are not designed to rule. Emotions communicate conditions that exist in the environment to alert us to what is happening in our midst. They are there to inform, they're not there to rule. That is reserved for the will. And the will whosoever will, you know, the will is the decision maker in us. And so what it's attempting to seize control over, it's attempting to seize control over our authority so it has access to our power so it can accomplish what it intends to do, which is to rule us.
Nothing can
So
seize you.
see, so
Yeah.
you step back and you say, okay, Jesus, how are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Just keep your mouth shut for now, Steve.
Well,
Just be still. It will burn itself out. Just leave it alone.
we have
Don't empower it.
so many of us have been seized, right? And we go through the cycles of seizing. I got something I got to do. We haven't done this ever before, Steve, but I got to do
Okay.
it.
Okay, man.
It's inspired, man. All right,
Okay.
you ready for this one? Okay,
Sure.
this is huge. This is just everything you've been saying has been like in my mind. This picture.
Okay.
Check him. He's gone. Goodbye, Mr. Anderson.
So you see, you can't be dead. You can't be. Because I love you. You hear me? I love you. Now get up.
No. How? He's the one.
Steve. Steve. I'm going to tell you something. Okay, like everything kind of coming together.
Yeah.
So what is that story of the Matrix, right? Neo, right? Do you want to go down the rabbit hole? Yeah. Okay. He goes down the rabbit hole. Everybody's like, "You're the one." He's like, "No, I'm not the one." He goes to the Oracle. He does all these things. He's challenged with these things. He sees the nature of this duality, of this life that he's lived for so long, and the reality that it is actually this simulation. And to think that everyone's thinking he's the one except him, right? And he's been told, "Hey, you are someone in me," right? And I'm kind of tying this into what we're talking about. That moment in which he literally stands up and all of the agents lift their guns and they all shoot, and those bullets, he goes, "No."
Yeah.
That's that moment for me where you say, hold on a second. You've forgotten who you are, Neo,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson. Who you are in me is not the power on your own.
Yeah.
It's who you are. And so what happens is the scene flicks to seeing the Matrix in the walls. And then of course at the end of that he flexes his muscles and it actually bends the very, structure of this simulation. And you think about this idea that these bullets are these things that are being fired at us, the picking
Yeah.
things. And to think that, Neo went from, if he had known since the beginning that he could stop them, because earlier in the movie he dodges them,
Yeah.
right? He's got this ability. I've never seen anyone move so quickly. He had a sense of who he was. He's like, oh yeah, this is kind of weird. Maybe they're right. No, the Oracle says it's not right. He's confused. He doesn't have this confidence in it. And obviously, I think what's amazing is, Trinity says, "I love you," which
Yeah.
there's no mystery that she is Trinity.
No.
But this idea that say, hold on a second, at the core of this love is to say, who are you in me?
Yeah.
And in me, these are merely pieces of lead, or these are only, and they have no temptation to seize you except what is common to man. And so as we stand up underneath it is to say, hold on, if you can recognize who you are in this creation as a son of mine, like the prodigal son who has come back and said, oh man, if I could just be a servant. No, 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 no. I financed your debauchery so that you would understand the nature and character of your father. And not in the power that you would become a ruler who dominates others, but that in the nature and character of the one who created it all, that you're actually aligned with the creation. And I think about what would it look like if there was a community of people who understood that without him they can do nothing, but with him they can do everything.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, yeah, it's one of the there's about 15, maybe 20 movies, beginning with The Usual Suspects over the next 10 or 12 years that came out in this very context, in the nature of, okay, Jesus, let's open up the modern day temple that Satan uses as his bully pulpit. And he has said this is the means by which he's going to communicate his message. Jesus, let's do that and let's communicate your message. And so for a period, like I said, of about a dozen years, there were maybe 15, 20 movies that were very much like that, that are parables themselves, that speak openly about how this thing works. Last week, I think we were talking about the story of Jesus coming out of his time of prayer and the disciples saying, hey, the temple complex is a great place for God to hang out, man. This place is really cool. And Jesus says, man, don't you see? Well, what happened to Neo in that situation? He finally saw what this thing was. Not that as it was presented to be, but as it actually was, in its reality. Well, we're going through that very thing right now at a national level.
yep,
We are under a silent invasion. And not only is the silent invasion happening, we are supporting it, and we are giving it power and authority, and we're actually enjoying it many times. But what's happening is the invasion is happening, and it's in full force, and it's been going on for several years. Well, do we actually see what's going on? Do we understand what's happening? Have we stepped back and said, okay, Jesus, how are you seeing this? Because it looks to us like this thing's falling apart at the seams. Is that how you see it? What is actually going on there? You mentioned about the whale. Okay, the whale pulls out and creates all kinds of havoc. Okay, Jesus, how are you seeing that? What's going on here? What's actually happening? Well, Matt, aren't you the one that said the best time to get involved is at the bottom? Well, how's the bottom look right about now?
yeah,
Is it looking more bottom?
yep,
Okay, well, if it's looking more bottom, what's the problem? See, it's if the bottom is the best time to get involved, then hey, let's go to the bottom.
yep,
Let's do that. And in the meantime, we don't know what that person's responsibilities, needs, circumstances, issues, whatever. We don't need to. Whether they were well intended, whether they were mandatory for him or her, we don't know that. All we know is that the extraction occurred. Okay, Jesus, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, you've been talking about bottom. Here we go. Oh, okay, huh. I don't like that because I really want it to go up. Well, see? So you see that little adversarial element that comes in?
yep,
That what it's intended to do is to distort the way you look at something so it can control what you think through what you see. No, that's not how this game is actually played. See, we are built to see both heaven and earth at the same time. We are built to see the material and the spiritual at the same time. We just don't know how to do it. It's not, I was built to be a Major League Baseball player. At 6 years old, I had no business. I could barely hold on to a bat or throw a ball. But that did not change. That my skill not yet being refined did not change the fact that the inherent attributes were already there. They just needed to be refined and honed. And that's where we are.
yeah,
And you're jumping in both feet.
yeah. Well, and
You're saying, let's do this. Wow. let's
Well,
do it. And it's pretty powerful.
it is. And you said earlier, I thought was really amazing, is that when it's really serious, it's a galvanizing force.
Yeah.
And so remember 9/11? Wow.
Mhm.
What a galvanizing force. Now, there are, we know of the term false flag. We know of the way in which you can use, these crises to get people to move,
Yeah.
right? But we do sense when things are minor and when things are major. And of course, you think about, well, if it was just up to man, we'd be lost. And you think about, well, how do you perceive the bottom? How do you perceive towers that fall? How do you perceive wars between Russia and Ukraine? How do you perceive the threat of nuclear war? How do you perceive these UFOs or these demonic forces? How do you perceive this? And it's so powerful to think in terms of Neo standing there saying, no,
No.
no. And you think of that, well, what is it in us that has the ability to say no and to stop and to pause? And you think about that, well, what's the result of that pausing? Because what's so really interesting is that Jesus even came onto the scene.
Yeah.
Okay, so think about this. Prior to Jesus coming onto the scene, there were a lot of different representations of God, right? We have this temple, we have this tabernacle, we have this box, we've got these miraculous things that we put in this box, we see this power, and we see these pictures of our relationship with him. You said it the other day. You said, hey, you had to carry this ark on these wooden poles. And you had to partner. He didn't decide to make it float on its own. Like, people had to carry it.
Yep.
So I think about this idea. Hold on, was the power in the carrying? No, the power was in the ark. So this is this thing that liquefied Korah and 250 of the leaders of Israel, liquefied them. And someone literally tripped and put their hand to it and died. That partnership idea, to think that all of these things were happening, right, in these pictures of pillars of smoke and pillars of fire and provision and manna and quail and all of this stuff through the wanderings in this provision. And then to think, all right, I'm going to come and model, right? If it wasn't apparent from just looking at the heavens and how they declare my structure, I'm going to go one step further and I'm going to literally walk on this earth and I'm going to model this behavior for you. And it's really fascinating when you start thinking about that way. Like that first miracle, it's like, woman, my time has not yet come. It's like, hey, we need some more wine, dude. And what's
My
amazing,
boys are parched.
yeah, it's like, hold on a second. This idea that, well, he was reflecting to his mother that he only did that in which the Father told him to do.
Yes.
And you see this dependence upon it. You see this at the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Literally sweating blood. Is this, hey, do we have to go about it this way? No, I don't do anything except what the Father tells me to do. And so now I think of Neo, right? This illustration that we're using here of going, when you recognize where your power, from whence it comes, what is the source of the power to say no, it's inherently in you. But what's amazing is the Son of Man, who Jesus was, this representation, right? The one and only Son. An amazing picture comes into play here, is that every single one of these stories, every single one of these parables, every single one of these miracles is to say, let me show you who you are in me.
Yeah.
And I think what's so fascinating and so powerful in all of this is no one in my life until I met you would look me in the eye and say, do you know who you are in him? Not so that you may have power to lord over, not so that you may have power to judge, but so that you may have life and have it, live it to its fullness. And I go, hold on a second. So we get to do this thing aligned with the very nature and character of who you are. We get to understand its structure, model your behavior, discipline our stuff to be professionals at this. And what is the outcome of people doing that in community? Wow. And I look at this new economic order, like, let's bring it home to crypto. What does this look like? John Nash wins the Nobel Prize in 1994 for game theory. And he comes up, he just recognizes something of the creation. And what is the idea of the creation? Hey, if we consider others in addition to ourselves, we all win. Huh, that sounds like, you didn't have to win the Nobel Prize for that one. You can basically read your Bible and see that one. But how that in the secular world was such a profound idea of negotiation and contributed to this whole idea that, hold on a second, if we actually consider others in addition to ourselves and we understand who we are in alignment with the very structure and nature and character of God himself, that there is the ultimate manifestation of the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And it seems really interesting that here we are at this pivotal moment where money is changing. and my coins in a bottle.
Yeah.
That he's using these things to say, and you said it earlier so well. You said these mechanisms are neutral, and it's like the Lord Jesus himself is saying to us, how are you going to animate this one?
Yeah.
Are you going to
Yeah.
animate it in my nature and character for for my intention, my plans of what the kingdom is supposed to look like? And then I think about, what if people actually did align themselves with the very nature and character, and led and ruled and reigned in this way, considered others in addition to themselves? What would it look like? And we got it. We're getting a glimpse of it. We see that in the Mexican community. I think that's one of the reasons they're so drawn to it. Is, hold on a second. It's just like the founding fathers. They could have been kings. Did they do it perfectly? No, but they decided, hold on, we're going to do this differently. And then I think about Hex. What Richard Hart could have easily just rug pulled people and dominated people with the OA, but what did he say? No, in order for us to animate this and to really unlock its value, we have to do this together. And what do? We convince each other to wait on its yield. And in that is even this huge idea of the very structure of an agricultural setting in which we partner with God to break up the soil. We don't germinate the seed. We aren't the sun, and we aren't the water. And it's like we partner with him for yield. And I think about that as it relates to this community. Is it possible that as this quote unquote transfer is happening, that he's planting in his people through these difficulties to see that if you would order yourself in alignment with me, you are going to not overreact to stuff. You're going to consider others in addition to yourself, which is going to have blessing and protection. And the result of it is an abundant harvest.
Yeah.
And that is just mind numbing.
Well, it's one of the things that in my experience, Matt, and I pass it on to you and to the folks on this stream and others that I know, it is Jesus is a master at realigning perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, through a simple word, one word, he can totally change the way that you view something. And once that change occurs, you actually see it for what it is, and your entire demeanor towards it, your entire behavior, and the way everything is totally changed the moment you see it for what it is. Well, if you are our enemy, what would your number one task be? To keep you from seeing it as it is.
Yeah.
Well, what do we call that? Darkness.
Wow.
See, so it's not all this spiritual weird stuff.
Yeah.
It is actually a dynamic of living in the everyday world. And you know what happens when you see the way things actually are? You just go about your business.
Yeah.
You just go about your business. And Mary and the company were off a day's journey off, and somebody said, "Where is Jesus?" And Mary, in a state of panic, said, "Oh my gosh, where is he? Maybe he's still back." So they haul butt back to Jerusalem. And they look here and they look there, they're frantic, and finally they find Jesus in the temple talking to the elders. And she says, "How could you do this to me? Mom, where else would you expect me to be? Weren't you the one that who said that Gabriel spoke to you and told you who I was? The one whom you were going to bear? Where else would you think that I would be? I am about my Father." Now, the translations say being about the Father's business. That is what he said. I am about my Father. Where my Father is, that is where I am. And right now, he is here talking to these men who are astounded at the things that he was saying to them.
As a 12-year-old?
As a 12-year-old, perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective. Do you not know that that man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man? Now, if you know that, then it's not a stretch for you to see that. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. So if my Father is working on the Sabbath, guess what the priority is? I'm going to be working with my Father. By the way, don't you do that if one of your animals falls into a ditch on the. So if you, being a man, will retrieve your animal, which is of a lower class than man, if you would do that, what would you expect our Father to do? But to go and retrieve the one who is stuck in whatever ditch he finds himself in.
What ditch do you find yourself in? Father comes to rescue you. How about them apples? You rule. Folks, I tell you what, it's just, it's amazing. I listened to that once and then I listened to it again. I experienced it in real time and here we replay it back and there's something new. You know, we shared that clip of you know, The Matrix. And he talked about those movies, you know. I don't know if you remember The Usual Suspects, but there was all this deception and questionable antics of all those characters. And at the end, you know, Kaiser Sose, Kobayashi, and everything changed perspective. And it's amazing. I made up a ton of notes, but one of the last things that Steve said was Jesus is the master of realigning perspective. And you think about the practice that Steve did, that he passed on to me. It's like, hang on a second. Are you open to a new way of thinking about this? Yeah. Pause for a moment, back up, and ask Jesus how he sees it. That was modeled so many different times, right? And he just shared that with Jesus at 12 being in the temple. Jesus is about his Father's business. Jesus is given all authority. Everything is created for him and by him. No one gets to the Father except through him. He's in the line of Melchizedek, high priest. He is, it's amazing. He's alive and he speaks, folks. Period. End of sentence. And you know what? I challenge anyone that's a pastor to come on this program and tell me that Jesus is not alive and doesn't speak. And what's really interesting about it is, you know, this phrase in the Bible, this verse that says that you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. That's where I feel like we are, right? We have so like separated ourselves and distanced ourselves from a living Jesus that we've become lukewarm. And it's almost like disgusting. I'll spit you out of my mouth. And all it takes is interest. Are you interested? And what's funny about this is the Matrix, you know, I'm just blown away by that. The Matrix movie is set up with Neo, Mr. Anderson, not knowing who he really is, not knowing what the context he's in. And they go, hey, choice, red pill, blue pill. Are you interested? It's really cool that we use art to mimic this and to tell stories that we can relate to. But you know what's amazing is I was listening. I mean, so many things have been coming out recently. I listened to a podcast where Tucker Carlson was being interviewed, and he asked him about, "Hey, what do you think about all this UAP UFO stuff?" And he's like, "Hey, I don't need to know anymore." And the interviewer was like, "What do you mean?" It's a Navy SEAL guy, and he's like, "Yeah, it's demonic. It's spiritual in nature." And I'm like, so many people. I mean, it's funny, like, you know, when you go to church and pay your taxes, these things are being revealed to so many people. And I look at like this Gen X crowd of which I find myself a part of, right? And as the boomers pass, right? Steve is a boomer as well. It's an interesting perspective that there's something that is shifting and changing and being revealed. Steve wrote a white paper called the 1960s White Paper. And in that, he talked about what entered into America, into society through that culture and through the kind of the open doors of the drug culture and all that kind of stuff. And he had amazing perspective on it. But he said he said many times, and of course we know this from the scriptures, that sin is crouching at the door. And you know, I've kind of dismissed those things, but every time you come back to, you're like, why do you think it's crouching at the door? And I think he said this last week in the video we played. Why do you think it's outside of a door, and why do you think it's crouching? Because it does not have the authority to come in. It's crouching because it's crafty. It's trying to get in, but it can't get in without your authority, without you opening the door. And it's really interesting as men, as we discipline ourselves, when we think about this idea of, if God's whole purpose in designing this whole thing was that we we would do it with him, in consultation with him. And that when we go on our own, he gave us choice. We know this good and evil. We see this. But it's like, no, I designed it so that we would do this together in consultation. And he talked about it last week about what did Eve do in the garden? When she'd walked with God, with Adam, they were in constant communication. And Satan comes through this serpent and says, he didn't say that. Well, they'd been operating for whatever period of time they were there, counseling, being like literally walking with and being consulted with. And it's like, I'm going to make you an offer in which you decide to give me your authority. Basically, you're going to go your own way. And Steve believes, and I believe that that was the plan all along, so that you would know the difference between good and evil, because in order to rule, you have to discern between good and evil. And he says, I'm going to be with you. And what's amazing is Jesus himself ultimately says, hey, I got to go, but I'm sending one who will be with you. The Spirit, this one who will literally is the counselor who will remind you of everything I said. The greatest decentralization event in the history of the world. I will be with you until the end of the age. Jesus is alive and he speaks, folks. Call it what you will, but you have access, right? You don't have to go up to a temple once a year and pay for your sins. You have access. You will worship in spirit and in truth. You have access. Are you interested? Are you interested in the perspective of the one who created it all or not? Because you know what's so funny is I feel like I see people all the time, even people I respect that I consider to be spiritually mature, and they say, well, I'm praying for discernment and I'm praying about this, but then the actions are like guessing. And what Steve showed me was you don't have to guess. You don't have to guess. Because what you're basically saying is, I don't really believe that you're alive and you speak. I don't really believe that you're going to tell me the answer to this thing. But he's saying, I got the answer to this thing. And so what people do is they throw up a Hail Mary, right? They're like, I'll pray about this. But then I'm going to go my own way and I'm going to go figure it out. What if you actually paused for a second? That's what Steve did. And what's amazing about it is he never lorded that over me. He said, this is available to you. Well, then I think about the gospel being good news. Why is it good news? Well, it's not good news if it's like bad news for the Muslim. It's not good news. No, it's good news because we're all, if you're breathing on this planet, you were created in this image. I don't care what you believe. I don't care if you're a 3-year-old in Tibet or if you're a 65-year-old man in Florida. You're made in the image of God and you have access to him if you're interested. Are you interested? Because it says that while you were still sinners, Jesus died for you. Like everyone, commonly is like, well, I got to get myself together before I can approach this fellow. No, you don't. You want to know him? And that's the other thing too. We've kind of built this belief system that you can't come to him unless you read the whole Bible 12 times. No, we don't get to know someone by reading a book about them. We get to know someone by talking with them. But if I can convince you that Jesus is dead, he's not alive, and he doesn't speak, then I can get you to worship a book that was written about him. The book's great, but the book isn't Jesus. It's amazing. It blows my mind. So here's some of the notes I took. God is the pure expression of love. And you think about this pure expression of love, this ability, he's given us the ability to choose. I said last week that Cain slew Abel. God did not stop that. You have choice. I think about, why do all these good things happen to bad things happen to good people? And why are all these people shooting up schools? And why are we see war and all of these kind of things? And you stop for a second, you say, well, because you are like me, I've given you this choice. I give you a design. I tell you all about this. I model the way. And And I feel like it's with my parents, like, how many times do I have to tell you, Matt? My parents said that all the time, right? How long is it going to take you to get it through your thick skull, kid? I'm sure you may have heard that from your parents as well. And I'm like, yeah, they got a constant reminder. What do you have to do with kids? It's amazing to me. All these times that Jesus was doing these miracles, you know what he used to say, like before he did it? Many of them, he was like, hey, folks, I'm about to do something. Pay attention to this. Why did he do it? Did he do it so that Lazarus would not die again? No, Lazarus died again. Did he do it because everybody needed some wine? No, he did it and he revealed who he was. I mean, even a voice came from the sky multiple times. This is my son. With him I'm well pleased. This is my son. Listen to him. Paul, why are you persecuting me? Jesus is alive and he speaks. You know, we talked in that clip about this idea that we get drawn off sides. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man. I see this all the time. It's sin is crouching at the door, right? It wants to draw you off sides and it comes in through the open ports. And what ends up happening is we have this choice. And he said, emotions are not designed to rule, they are designed to inform. The will is designed to choose and to rule. And you rule over these things. And it's interesting. What is the ultimate ruling over for Steve Staggs? He told me, this is crazy. He said to me, everybody wanted, because I was a professional baseball player, this is Steve speaking, everybody wanted me to look at their kid. Hey, look at my kid. He can hit the ball. He can run fast. Watch him run the bases. He's like, I don't need to see this. And of course, the parents were kind of offended. He's like, all I need to know is what does your son do when he's not playing baseball? And if you think about this, what do you want? Why did Steve become a professional baseball player? Because he couldn't stop thinking about baseball. And every part of his life, he was thinking about baseball. And every time something happened, like he saw a curveball, he's like, I got to figure that thing out. He dove into the game of baseball to understand everything about it, when the kid that might have been bigger or stronger or faster was doing something else. And the people that make it to that professional level, and I think of that as an analog to, are we going to be professionals in our faith and in our journey with the Lord Jesus, is that there is a function of discipline that comes in with this stuff. It's like, I want to know how this is built and how you want me to align myself with this, because you created me and you got a plan and a purpose and you're a shepherd. And we recognize your voice. You're out front. You're leading. It's your plan, not mine. It's your will, not mine. But you've designed all of these things in my life. Look at David. It's like, I fought the lion and the bear. He knew exactly what to do when facing Goliath. And so do you. And it's amazing to me at such levels of infinite resolution, how the things of your life that you thought were just absolute destruction come back to be revealed as purposeful and helpful for the next thing. And that's when I think about this redeeming thread that goes through all of life. Oh my, what you think is destruction and loss and crisis and is redeemed. And it's a story of redemption. But here's the crazy part. It's super short. I got the text from Marcia saying Steve had passed. And I'm like, no, Steve passed. He's gone. He's not gone. He's not gone. He's more alive than he's ever been. I read that verse at the beginning of this. We see like in a mirror dimly, and we will see face to face. We will see it clearly. Steve sees it clearly. Death is not the end, it's a reward. And what's so amazing about this is it feels like he's kind of grading on a curve. Yeah. Talk about grace upon grace. It renews each morning, and you're like, hey, all right, I'm going to try to do it better today. Can you help me with this thing? And then he shows me all the things in my life where I lack discipline, and then shows me like what the effects of that are on other people. And I'm like, man, I say to myself, I got to get my act together. And what does Jesus say to me? I can help you do that, Matt. You interested? Wow. Well, what's the currency of God? It is not money. It's not dollars. It's not Lambos. It's a peace that transcends all understanding. It's the ability to stand with the living Jesus in the midst of the storm. But why would he do that? Why would he say that this gate is narrow, but the one to destruction is wide? Maybe he's assembling a group of folks for a purpose. I want him to see me. I want to walk through the narrow gate. And it sounds like these meat suits that we're in are temporary, but that what he has planned is eternal. And it looks like this place might be boot camp. And you know what's funniest? How many times do I have to tell you before you get it through your thick skull? But we don't like manna. I don't like this. It doesn't taste good. What? People. It's amazing. I'm just so thankful he hasn't given up on us. And then you think about that kind of love, and you're just like, man. Whew. This is good stuff. Folks, thank you, Jesus, number one. Thank you, Steve Staggs. Thank you, Carter Hill, for bringing him. Thank you for being here. Thanks for 73 people viewing this. I hope it's an encouragement to you. To me, this is just a reminder, right? Like, Sabbath was made for man. It's a reminder. Why do you think the Jews had all those festivals, man? Constant reminder. We need a constant reminder. And that's the whole point of doing this. And I'm just so thankful. Because I made a commitment. I'm like, I'm doing this every Friday at 11, whether I feel like it or not. And sometimes I'm prepared and sometimes I'm not. But every time my mind is blown. John May. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Without Jesus, that's where you'll go. Grandpa Paul's good to see you. Thanks for being here, Mike. Appreciate you. And Grandpa Paul says, of course, Jesus is alive and king. He gave us the power. So amazing. So amazing. Folks, thanks for joining the Pulse. Thanks for spending some time on Stephen Friday. Have a great weekend. I will say, as a little bonus on crypto, folks, things are shifting. Things are changing dramatically. They're about to shift. And I just want to point out a couple things. This is non-spiritual related, but I just want to tell you what's been encouraging me. I got into crypto the last time GameStop guy, and his name is Roaring Kitty. Have you been watching that deal? He's going to be like a billionaire here potentially. But what's funny is I was knee deep in leverage trading of futures, and it was like, destructive. And here's all this GameStop stuff, and you're seeing the collusion between people in the community, basically squeezing these, hedge funds for billions. And I'm like, yeah, finally somebody's pushing back on these, these fellows. And here he is again. And it's an indicator. It's to me, kind of an indicator like, all right, here we go. In Europe, they lowered interest rates by a quarter point. I don't know if you watched NVIDIA, what they announced with their new products and what's happening with AI. That can either be really exciting or really scary all at the same time. Obviously people have been shaken out. They thought it couldn't go lower and then it goes lower. The Ethereum ETF's obviously been approved, but the money isn't there yet. All the debt from COVID's got to be, what is it? All that debt has to be refinanced. We got an election coming up. Dude, election's like in 5 months. And all of these things in the natural upside down world are the constant cycle, because what is the cycle of the markets, if not a model of human emotion? And that's why it's quite predictive, because even those who are, being provided for by God in the wilderness, they went through these cycles of like complaining. It says in Haggai too, it says, You came to a heap of 50 measures, and there were only 20. I struck your hands with blight, mildew, and hail, and you did not return to me, says the Lord. In your own ability in this world, the rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous. There's a model, there's a design to this where you follow him, but you come to a heap of 50 measures thinking you're going to get 50 measures. What is that? Richard Hart pumped my bags or whatever it may be, and there's only 20. You're always constantly striving for the thing that you think is going to bring you peace. Money, financial security, this car, that thing, this relationship, this social signaling, this watch, whatever it may be. Folks, it's an idol. And the system right now is upside down, and we're just extracting from others. We're just stealing. It's just abstracted stealing. We have an opportunity to build the alternative financial system. And folks, it's about to get really interesting. People's countenance is going to change soon. And it has to. Raoul Pal calls it the banana zone. The banana zone's coming. What does that mean? Is it going to pump all the tokens that you happen to hold? Maybe, maybe not. But in it lies an opportunity for us to rule and reign in the nature and character of God. And how do you do it? By being interested in asking him, how do you see this? From every moment of challenge that you have in your own personal life, to the financial system, to what you're involved in. The amazing thing about following Jesus, not being a Christian, by the way, following the living Jesus and listening to him and holding each thought captive and going, hey, how do you see this? Is life, real life. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. That's not about salvation. That is about the very nature and structure of the whole shooting match. For those who have ears to hear, thank you for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt, the Script to Heartbeat. Thanks be to God. See ya.